You know, the last episode of any TV series should leave a lasting impression on the audience. It shouldn't basically do anything but wrap up a lot of things. But the last episode of Star Trek, my God, ladies and gentlemen. Turnabout Intruder, Drek is not even the word to describe it. It is putrid, and it's probably lower top 5 of the worst episodes of Star Trek. Now, the 24th and final episode of the third season of the series was written by Arthur H. Singer, based on the story by Gene Roddenberry, and directed by Herb Wallerstein. First broadcast on June 3rd, 1969, and basically a few weeks after the previous original episode. In this one, a woman switches bodies with Captain Kirk, a former girlfriend, and then tries to take over command of the Enterprise, with bullshit results. Originally scheduled to air on 10 p.m. on Friday, March 28, 1969, NBC preempted it with a special report on former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had died earlier that day. On June 3rd, 1969, after an absence of 2 months, Star Trek was brought back at a new night and time, Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Turnabout Intruder was the only first-run episode to be shown in a new time slot. Now, this, again, was the last original episode of Star Trek aired on NBC. Now, the acting is pretty good in it, where Kirk is not playing a woman, his girlfriend. Now, Dr. Janice Lester, played by Sandra Smith, she's playing Kirk as Lester, and it's quite effective. Especially the scene where Spock finds out it is Captain Kirk. Now, the deviant in it is Harry Landers, the somewhat sexually confused Dr. Arthur Coleman, who basically, as McCoy said, is known for his blunders. Now, in this one, the Federation Starship Enterprise answers a stress call from the planet Camus 2, the site of an archaeological expedition. Among the survivors are Dr. Janice Lester, with whom Captain Kirk was once intimately involved, and the expedition's physician, Dr. Arthur Coleman. Coleman claims that Lester is suffering from radiation exposure. While Lester and Kirk are alone, they reminisce about their time together at Starfleet. Lester blames sexism within Starfield for a failure to become captain. When Kirk explores the room, she activates an alien machine that traps and paralyzes him. She then enters the machine herself, and the machine switches their life entity. The new Kirk declares that he will take command of the Enterprise and begins to strangle Lester, but the returning Spock and McCoy interrupt him. Back in the ship, over McCoy's protests, Kirk, acting out of sorts, gives Dr. Coleman full authority of the treatment of Lester, and is revealed that Lester and Coleman conspired to kill the expedition's personnel. Spock eventually becomes suspicious when Kirk orders a course change to the Benicia colony to drop off Lester for medical attention, despite the fact that Benicia's medical facilities are comparatively primitive and that it would not necessarily interfere with their current mission. McCoy invokes an authority to order medical examination of the captain, including a personality test. Now, Spock is very logical, and when he's finding out that Kirk is acting kind of weird, especially with the warp speed to get where he needs to go, it's pretty apparent Spock knows and McCoy knows this is not Kirk. When Lester regains consciousness and seeks help from Spock and McCoy, Kirk slaps her back into her unconsciousness after she runs away and orders her to be put in isolation. Spock interviews Lester and is somewhat skeptical of her story. Lester suggests that he use his telepathic abilities to learn the truth, and he's convinced. I believe you. Spock tries to free Lester, but is stopped by a security team led by the imposter Kirk, who accuses Spock of mutiny and orders a court-martial. Once on trial, Spock argues that Captain Kirk is really the body of Dr. Lester. Kirk suggests that Spock's real goal is to take command himself and offers to drop charges if Spock will desist. Spock refuses, and Kirk flies into hysterical rage. Shocked by Kirk's behavior, McCoy and Scott confer secretly in the corridor. Scott believes that if Scott is acquitted, the captain will not let the decision stand, making it necessary to mutiny. Kirk, having monitored a conversation, declares McCoy, Scott, Spock, and Lester guilty of mutiny and are condemned to death. On the bridge, Chekhov and Sulu, having witnessed the trial, determined to resist the captain and refuse to obey his orders. Loudly accusing them of mutiny, Kirk falls into his chair, and an image of Lester emerges from his body, only to return again. Kirk runs to Coleman, who tells him that the transfer is reversing itself, and that Kirk and Lester's body must die in order to prevent it. The two head to the brig, intending to inject Lester with a toxic substance. This is after the Kirk comes on to the doctor as Lester playing Kirk. Pretty freaky scene. It's sort of Dr. Jekyll, Mrs. Hyde type things. Now, Now, Lester eventually resists the toxic substance, and the reversal now completes itself. Realizing she's lost her triple attempt to kill Kirk, destroy her female gender, and gain the ability to command a starship, she suffers a complete mental breakdown. The hysterical Lester begs Coleman to kill Kirk. Coleman then pleads with Kirk to allow him to care for her. Coleman and Lester are escorted to sickbay. Then Kirk, Spock, and Scotty proceed to the bridge, and the Enterprise proceeds on its mission. And that's it. Now, the only fault with the episode, body changes and all that can be done for comedic purpose, but done in an evil version. And compare this to other key episodes of Star Trek. There was some good ones in Season 3, but this is just completely terrible. Now, the movie not only marked the final appearance of all the main and supporting cast members of the show, but also the last appearance of regular background actors David L. Ross, who played Lieutenant Galloway, William Blackburn, Lieutenant Hadley and DeForest Kelly stand-in, and Roger Holloway, Lieutenant Lemuel and James Doohan stand-in. Blackburn had appeared in more episodes than cast members George Takei and Walter Koenig, and Holloway's appearances were only 2 episodes short of Koenig. Ross had been a background actor since the first season. Now, Nichelle Nichols did not appear in this episode. The position of the communications officer was played by Barbara Baldwin, who had previously appeared in 2 first-season episodes of the show, the Very Strong Balance of Terror, and of course Shore Leave, where she runs into the tree. As noted in 75 books Star Trek Lives by co-author Joan Winson, William Shatner was sick with the flu during the filming of the episode. Winson was on set for 6 days of filming. No excuse. Filming of the episode was completed on January 9, 1969, having gone 1 day over schedule. A few days earlier, the crew had been notified of the cancellation of the show. And again, it appeared 6 months later. Now, the episode drew Nielsen ratings of only 8.8, in contrast to rival shows Lancer on CBS and Mod Squad on ABC, which gained ratings of 14.7 and 15.2 respectively, a drop of over 50% since the show premiered. Cultural theorist Cassandra Amosley states that the episode was agreed to be one of the worst Star Trek episodes ever shown. Now, David Grevin has a more positive view of the episode, even referring to it as moving. I don't know what he's saying, but yeah, it made me move, probably made my bowels move. He calls it the infamous last episode of the original series, in part because of the campiness of Shatner's performance when portraying himself as a female in a male's body, but also because of the sexist premise and the female desire for power was a clear sign of insanity. Now, in 2016, CNET ranked this episode as the fourth worst of the series, based on rankings between an audience and discussion hosts at a 50th anniversary Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. In 2017, the episode was ranked the fourth worst of the franchise, including later spin-off series by Screen Rant. A ranking of every episode of the original series by Hollywood placed this episode as the worst. In 2017, Den of Greek ranked this episode as the 7th worst Star Trek episode of the original series. I would give it the Eden episode where the space hippies is the worst, but this is pretty close as number 2. But just completely, like this is supposed to be the start of the feminist movement in the States. It was just insulting. Because if Janice Lester is as smart as she claims to be, she knows everything about the ship, she could probably play a better Kirk than Kirk would play a more demure version. But within 5 hours being in the body, she's conquered from taking over. Pretty freaky. So Turnabout Intruder, like I said, for camp, yes. But if you're really a Star Trek fan, stay away from them if you can. And, not to sound weird, this is a 9-10 minute podcast. You better to listen to this and I give you all the negatives rather than put yourself through a 51-minute episode where you see it for sure how bad it is. So that's my latest Star Trek classic series review. If you like what we're doing here with our podcast, let us know in a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.